All the
or bad idea.
You're listening to the Breece Creator Podcast. I'm Lee Breece. I learned a new word this week. I wonder if you know what it is. I bet you don't. We have a little more variety in this episode, talking about everything from sawdust to my stupid table project, minimalism, stocks, and tons more. Whether you have goals or you have no expectations of anything at all, amateur or expert, there's something in this episode just for you. It's a lot of talk about stocks, but some funny stories too. Let's go. You know, one thing to sum up this week, it's incredible how busy you get when you free up your schedule. I think I talked about that last week in the podcast. I just graduated from high school. I've been out of school for almost 4 weeks now. I went on a trip, so I was gone for a week. But otherwise, the other 3 weeks, I worked at a job. This is my second week at the nursery. I'm doing other side jobs. I'm doing woodworking. I'm doing other things like that. And I'm still incredibly busy. And I'm learning how to try to balance everything. And I'm quickly learning that you can't always handle all the things you want to do. And just like all of the projects that you've ever dreamed of, that you've ever wanted to do, I'm quickly realizing that they're all ridiculous. Mainly not because I just can't get them done, but I look back at the progress I've made. I look back and I think about how many projects I've completed in the last year, or last 6 months, or last month, and I think about like my table, the stupid table that I never wanted, that I just had the materials for and decided to make. It has been 3 months since I started that table, and I made one project in between. I made the chairs to take up to my uncle's cabin, but otherwise I haven't made any other projects. And this table is it took me 3 months. So if you think about that, you multiply that to a year-long period of time, and that's only 4 projects a year. And say I live to be 80, that's only, if you're saying I started my first, say I started doing that when I was 10, doing 4 projects when I was 10, so 70 years, that's only 280 projects. Now I've definitely done more than that, and obviously the table is a bigger project, but you can only make so many projects in your lifetime. You can only do so much. You can only go to so many concerts, go to so many family gatherings, talk to so many people X amount of times. You can only do so many things. And I'm not saying I'm learning how to value my time. That's not the way I'm thinking about it. I'm quickly realizing that that you really have to be moving every single day if you want to make progress, if you want to do something, if you want to consider yourself active. I don't know about you, but just the way that I feel like I need to be able to see my progress. I need to be active, and this is just how I critique myself. So like I said, this week I worked on the table, which actually I have I figured this out. This table that I don't need and have no purpose for, I've figured out exactly what it is. And in fact, I have a little journal that I keep with me, and every time I think about something I want to mention on the podcast, I write it down. That's one of the other things I've learned too, how important it is that every time you have an idea, every time you think about something critically, just to think about something, maybe you're dreaming, I always write it down, just because there's all these ideas and all these events going on that I always forget about. And I'm learning that as even though I'm only 19, I think as I age, I think about my poor mind. Anyway, back to the table. So I've decided to call this table that I'm making, that I don't need and have no place for, my puzzle table, because it's huge and really wide. Which is great for putting puzzles together. So I dare you to ask yourself, do you have a puzzle table? Now, I've talked about this table before. I've talked about it in the last who knows how many episodes, but this table is 66 by 42, which is huge. I don't think you could reach across the table and shake someone's hand. But it's definitely a good puzzle table. That's what I've thought about. When my family puts puzzles together, we put them together on a coffee table. And I don't know about if your family does puzzles or not, but my mom's big on puzzles. My grandma's big on puzzles. We always do puzzles. And so I thought this would be the perfect thing for this table. It'll be my puzzle table. Now that it has a purpose, I just have to find a place for it. 'Cause I don't have a huge house to put gigantic tables. Something else I wanted to talk about this week in the podcast is I was watching Matthias Wandel's video last week. He puts out a video every Friday, and he was talking about how taking apart and moving his Delta hybrid table saw. And it's a standard table saw. I think when I was watching the video, it said that it was like an industrial grade on it or something like that, and I'm not really sure. But anyway, so he talked about taking apart this table, and I have a Delta table saw too. It was my dad, so I don't really know much about it, but I know it comes apart. But the really weird thing is that Matthias Wendel started taking all of the tape, like the table part of the table saw apart in like 4 different pieces, and I always thought mine was one solid piece, and that's what it looks like to me. So someone's going to have to correct me on that. But anyway, he was taking it apart, and he talked about having to clean it off so he could prepare it to be moved. And he talked about how because he's not a production wood shop, that he doesn't have much sawdust in his table saw. And to me, that was the biggest joke I have heard all year. What do you mean you don't have tons of sawdust in your table saw? I don't know about you, but I never clean anything. The shop's a mess. The sawdust everywhere. It's always in the air, so there's a thick layer of dust on everything. I actually have an air cleaner. I just haven't put it up yet, and I don't use it. But the table saw just gets so full to a point, because I don't like using dust collectors or vacuums, just because you have to empty the bags and you have to buy bags. That's really why. Actually, with my dust collector, I just dump the bag and then I reuse the same bag. That's just the way I am. I'm really that cheap. But anyway, so what happens is the table saw gets so full that I open up the little side hatch door and I just let it pour out over time, because it just gets so full so fast. But then again, I have a planer and I have a joiner, but I don't ever use it. So the table saw kind of acts as my joiner. That that when I'm doing like dados and stuff like that, Matthias Wendel will typically do like grooves and then beat the excess out with a hammer. Whereas me, I'll do a dado stack, or I'll do just one saw blade and go over something over and over and over and over and over again. So I thought that was really funny. Tell us, leave us a comment, or maybe send us a message on our Instagram, Twitter, or you can email us at breececreatorpodcast@gmail.com with your responses to that. I'd love to hear if you guys actually have issues with table saw sawdust, because to me, that and the planer are my 2 biggest culprits of sawdust. I don't know what the heck Matthias Wandel's talking about. And so something else that's really cool that I did this week, I've talked about it before. In fact, the people I'm about to talk about actually inspired an episode of this podcast. The Minimalists came to Indianapolis. They performed in the Egyptian Room in the Old National Center, which was really cool to see them. They're from Dayton, Ohio, so they're not from really far away. But if you don't know who the Minimalists are, they're basically people who decided to embrace minimalism and then become celebrities for it. So that's kind of who they are. If you don't know what minimalism is, it's basically like you're getting rid of all the crap you don't need. And I think deep down, everyone is a minimalist. Everyone wants to get rid of junk. It's just about discovering that passion to get rid of stuff. Because I've talked about it before. In fact, we have a whole episode about how just in the last 30 to 40 years, this consumerist culture has evolved to where we're starting to buy things that we want instead of things that we need. And we're not actually thinking before we buy anything. We end up buying all this junk, pencil jars and extra screwdrivers and extra towels. And we have 4 or 5 winter coats, and we get all this junk mail that we hold on to in our school papers and things like that. And that kind of stuff piles up over time. We get multiple credit cards. We start dumb friendships that we think we're going to cling on to or embrace, or things like that. That's kind of what the minimalists talk about. It's not so much just about stuff, but they talk about relationships too, finances, and there's a lot of good stuff there. One of the things they talk about is what the new American dream is, and they talked about this in their show on Thursday, is that the new American dream is not to buy a house, have a family, get a nice car, and have a nice job, stuff like that. The new American dream in the 21st century is to be debt-free. Let that sink in. Because think about today, how many people, how many kids graduating college are going into student loan debt? Every college-age kid is, who I know, or at least who I've met in the nursery, and otherwise is going, they're going into the workplace with debt, 10, 20, 30, almost sometimes even $40,000 in debt. And that's kind of ridiculous to me. That and the mortgages are insane. And one of the things the minimalists talk about is that if you're going to get a mortgage, make it no longer than 7 years, 7-year mortgage. But the other thing that's kind of insanely stupid too is that people are walking around without a goal in mind. And the minimalists say that you shouldn't have goals in life. They just create stress, and they stress you out, and they don't really do anything. They don't act as intended. There was somebody at the show that we went to go see on Thursday, and this person, because they do a live recording of the podcast at the show, and part of the podcast is people sending in questions. So since it's live, that people stand up at a mic and ask questions. And this one woman came up, and she talked about how growing up, school is your purpose. And I said, yeah, I agree with that. I think the only thing kids should have to focus on is school. But then she continued on to say that she got out of college, and she didn't have any goals. She didn't have any purpose. She had nothing she wanted to do with her life. And so she said the only solution that she had was to go back to school. And so she went to graduate school, and then she graduated from graduate school, and then she started talking about all of the debt. But she didn't ask the minimalists how to get rid of the debt. She asked, again, how do you find goals without having goals? How do you guide yourself? I mean, she's almost like, you should have seen her, just the look in her eyes and the way she talked. She was thinking that these people were gods that she was hoping would solve all of her problems. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what causes people to think that way. I mean, I believe that when you're a kid, the kid's responsibility is to do well in school. That's the bottom line. And I wish that I had that opportunity when I was a kid, because I feel like I could have gone to Harvard the only thing I've been able to focus on was just school, nothing else. I don't understand on the flip side though. How do you not have a purpose? How do you not have a goal that you're striving towards? How do you not have someone you want to be, an idea? I mean, not just that, but how do you live without that? It's like, how do you get up every day? Because to me, it's, everything that I want to do with my life. I mean, I think about it every day, and what I do every day is going towards those goals, is with that in mind. Like, I didn't get into the Naval Academy, but when I was in high school and when I was in middle school, everything I did, I thought about the Naval Academy. I got a D on a test. That was the first thing that came to my mind. Like, oh man, this is going to be terrible from me getting into the Naval Academy. Or when I would, when I would have a good workout, I would think about, oh man, I'm going to do so much better on my physical test for the Naval Academy. And I'd be like, 13. And, I didn't have to apply to the Naval Academy until I was 17. And I just think about that. And the other thing too is that I've talked about how I'm going to Purdue and I'm going to major in political science and economics. And so one of the things I think about all of the time is, how am I going to set myself up to be successful politically? Whether I run for office or whether I get a job, how can I be doing something now to help me reach those goals? And one of those things that I do is by talking and meeting as many people as I can, hearing their story, hearing what they do. And that's how I create most of my opportunities, is just by, when I'm standing in line, turning around and talking to somebody behind me and hearing about what their story is. And that's what I did the Minimalists last night. So the show's over, and we all line up because we want to get our picture taken with the Minimalists. And there's a woman behind me, and I start talking to her. She goes to the same college as my sister, which is, ridiculous, because the college that my sister goes to is Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana, which is less than 1,000 kids. And she also said she was a photographer. And if you don't know, I just bought a very nice camera. It's the Canon T6i. I got it, so hopefully I can get into YouTube, which will be woodworking related and making related. Not just woodworking, but I'll be doing other things like electronics and programming and woodworking related stuff as well, and that'll be on the same YouTube channel that I post this podcast online. So that'll be the Breece Woodworking YouTube. So you can go there, check it out, subscribe, and I'm I'm already in the process of making some videos, so vlogging stuff as well, because I love getting out and going to events. So please go check it out, subscribe, do whatever you want to do. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube at any time. In fact, I'm actually limited because I'm using the free account on SoundCloud. I'm limited to how many episodes I can put on SoundCloud and iTunes. So I'm limited to 5 episodes, whereas on YouTube and the website, I put up all the episodes, every single one. So you can go back and listen to the archives of all the earliest episodes, which of course, this only being the ninth episode. The first 5 are, they're pretty amateur if you ask me. So anyway, you can be the one to judge my progress over time. I'll let you all do that. So going back to the girl who was asking the question to the minimalist about what I'm supposed to do after I graduate college, and she said she had all this debt and stuff, and we were talking about purpose and whatnot, and I'm not sure about you, but I mean, what do you get up and do every day? What is it that you do that takes you to the next level? What are you doing that makes you think about what your goal is? One of the things the minimalists do is that they tell you to write down everything you've always wanted to do, what your dreams are. Get married, fall in love, go on vacation, get the best job, maybe for projects. For me, for a long time, was build a bandsaw. Building a table's actually been one, but I don't need a table, so I never really had that as a priority. But think about all those things and write them all down. Take a piece of notebook paper and write all that down, and then flip it over and write down everything that you did in the last 24 hours. And look at all those things and try to figure out what of those things can you take off the list, or what kind of things can you modify, or what kind of things can you add to your daily routine to make those things part of today. You see, the things you've always wanted to do is your someday list. The things you did in the last 24 hours is your today list. But how can you combine the two and turn someday into today? That's a good question that I think about that all the time. And something else that, as a maker, the minimalists have never done an episode about making things. They've never done anything about, tools and stuff like that. I've always wanted to ask them a question about what do you do when you're a maker and you have tools and stuff like that, mainly because there's so many tools that you have that are so handy, especially if you're like a contractor. There's so many tools that are handy, but they're only used for one thing. And so they'll sit on the shelf for years, months, decades for that one-time use, maybe two-time use and whatnot. And it's like, I have several tools like that. And, it's like, do I hold on to them? Do I get rid of them? What do I do with them? Because I've talked about in earlier episodes about how we sold off this huge portion of my dad's tool collection, but that was all antique tools. But now I have all these tools I inherited from my dad, and it's thousands of tools, and it's probably tens of thousands of dollars worth of screwdrivers and planes and miscellaneous crap and a bunch of door stuff, stuff for hanging doors and crap. It's like, and there's other things too I've talked about where I don't know what the tool is, but is it worth my time to hold on to it and wait till I finally find a use for it or figure out what it is? Or should I get rid of it and wait till I figure out what it is and then buy it again? Now, my thing about that is, well, some of the tools are pretty expensive. I don't really want to have to sell a tool for $100 just to buy it again 5 years later for $300. That seems like kind of like a waste to me. But at the end of the day, I have this house where I can store all this stuff. I hate being surrounded by junk. So I've always wanted to do that, to get rid of these tools and everything. So I continue to think about that all the time. It's kind of like the minimalist, the way they preach everything is that there's not right and wrong. There's not, you need to get rid of this, you need to keep that. It's more about what's valuable to you, what adds value to your life, what things do you think about? And that's kind of how I address everything. Even with projects, I talk about how everything I make has a function. There's nothing aesthetic about it. Every project I have has a function, and that's how I do it. That's how I make it. That's how I design it. That's how I use it. So when I think about making stuff, it's all about what is the purpose of it? Why am I making it? How can I make this simple? How can I make it so it accomplishes the purpose? Now, one of the other things the minimalists talk about is the rule of just in case. It's the three most dangerous words in the English language, and but they also talk about the difference between just in case and just when items, kind of distinguishing between the normal person and then the preppers who are prepping for the apocalypse. And so there's some tools that I think that are just in case, like say I have this project I'm working on, and there's others that are like, well, if I'm ever going to do this, then I'm going to need this tool. But otherwise, like the table saw is a great multiverse tool. You can make all these jigs and stuff for the table saw, and so you don't need other tools. It's like the radio arm saw. You can do everything you can do with the radio arm saw. You can do with the table saw. So why do you need a radio arm saw? It just makes that's kind of why that tool's declined. The table saw does everything the radio arm saw does. And one of the other things that the minimalists talk about is the 90-90 rule. So you look back in the previous 90 days and if you've used something or not. And if you haven't, then you think, well, am I going to use this item in the next 90 days? So for instance, say you're sitting in July and you haven't used your winter coat in the last 90 days. But when 90 days come... well, I guess mid-September is not really winter coat weather, but you're going to use your winter coat again. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make here. So I had a really fun time checking out the Minimalists in Indy. I was able to get my picture with them, talk with them for a little bit, get a hug. They're big on hugs, so that was really fun. I don't really go to events much or go to concerts much like that. I don't go to things I have to pay for, so I bought those tickets. And so I don't, I very rarely will do stuff like that. But it was really cool. I wasn't very impressed with Old National Center. We were in the Egyptian Room, which typically they put concerts there that are, mosh pit type concerts. So this was like, imagine going to your 4-year-old's, kindergarten recital, and the chairs are set up in their cafeteria. That's kind of how the Egyptian Room is at the Old National Center. And the chairs were extremely tight. I mean, there was, I'm a broad-shouldered guy. I don't fit in a regular chair when they're sat next to each other. So my mom and I actually had to move seats because we didn't fit where we were sitting. And the thing is that we paid for those seats and they were dead center in the middle of the freaking theater. And then we had to move to the outside just to get places where I actually felt comfortable. So I thought that was pretty trashy, but I got to see the Minimalists and that was rewarding enough for me. So something else that happened to me this week, as you know, I talked about I'm doing side jobs. I'm working at the nursery. I'm doing woodworking. I'm trying to get stuff for Etsy going. And on top of that, I really want to go to the Lafayette Flea Market at the fairgrounds in Tippecanoe County it's not next weekend. I guess it is. Yeah, it's not this weekend, but next Sunday, it will be the first Sunday in July. That's when they have this flea market is the first of every month. And I don't know if you guys have ever been to flea markets, but this flea market is huge. And it's a Sunday morning ritual for a lot of people. And it's really cool because you get to see all this antique stuff, all this old stuff. And of course, flea markets, you get all kinds of deals. And so, my dad would always take me there when I was a kid. I really enjoyed it. But I also have... But I also have a bunch of crap I want to get rid of and maybe try to find an outlet to make stuff and sell it there at the flea market. So we'll just have to see if that's, see how successful that is. I've never set up there, so I'm really excited. So if you're in that area, Lafayette, Indiana, maybe you're surrounding, I'll be at the Lafayette Flea Market in Tippecanoe County at the fairgrounds Sunday, July 2nd. And I'll hopefully be set up by 7 a.m. and we'll be going. But anyway, something else that happened to me this week. We have this hoeing job for I work for all these farmers. I technically live in a subdivision, but the subdivision's in the middle of nowhere. So we have all these farmers and whatnot, and they all need this is how I made money when I was in high school. Was not by getting a job, but by going down and knocking on doors, saying, "Hey, you need a young, strong kid to do stuff for you." And that's how I got a lot of my work, and that was kind of my marketing scheme, and that's how I've kind of been able to branch out and do other things. But anyway, one of the things we have to do every year is hoeing, because the weeds will grow regardless of whether you spread herbicide or not, just because they've sprouted either before you put on the herbicide or after the herbicide's been, after it's been sprayed. It's only effective for so much amount of time. But anyway, so we have to go out there. It's about 3 or 4 acres, and you have to hoe every single row by hand. And I did it by myself last year. I had a buddy that I called come help me. The last week I spent 4 weeks out there, and this year it's the same thing. Him and I are out there. We're out there all freaking day, and it's it's central Indiana, so I mean it gets pretty hot. It's been like 80, 90 or 90 degrees. And I try to call a buddy to come help us. And this is a kid that just graduated just like me. And, when I was growing up, I always took every job that was offered to me. I always, every time an opportunity came my way, I always saw it through. I always created opportunities for myself. And I took, I needed the money. And this other kid that I'm talking about that I called to come help us, this kid's not doing anything, and I'm not going to say he's privileged, but he's never, his parents make a very generous income, and he actually works because his parents make him pay for his own gas and some of his own expenses like that. But I called him out to come help us because we were desperate, we were wanting help, and this had to be done this week. That was the big thing. I am all about the money, so I would have been out there by myself, however long it took if I had an unlimited amount of time. But this kid, we were desperate. We had to get it done this week. And I called this guy, and he said, "No, I don't want to. I don't want to help you." And this kid was a friend of mine, and I don't understand. I don't understand why. Why would anyone ever do that? Not only to a buddy, but when someone says, "I need your help," I mean, why would you say no? What more of a jerk thing to do than that? And that's personally more me just ranting. But, the job paid, and he's going to get money for that. He's going to be able to do something. And, another point I like to make is that, graduating high school, those 2.5, 3 months right after you graduated are the freest, most opportunist months that you will have in your entire life. Mentally, you're not thinking about anything school-related. You don't feel obligated to do anything. You don't have any burdens. You don't have any responsibilities. And if you really want to accomplish anything or do anything with yourself or go on a big trip or do a big project or something like that, then that period of time, those 2.5, 3 months, is the time to do that. And I know most of our listeners are past that point, but I'm in that time right now. And I actually really regret taking this nursery job because even though I'm only working part time, but I'm doing all these other side jobs, so I'm still working like 40 hours a week technically, doing all this other crap. And I don't have time to do anything that I wanted to do. I was hoping to do YouTube videos, which I'm still going to do eventually this summer. I was hoping to get into the Etsy stuff, product development, making stuff and putting it on Etsy. I haven't been able to get into any of that just because I've been so bogged down from working. And, there's nothing wrong with money. But, I mean, the other thing is, too, is with this nursery job, I make more money when I'm standing around on my phone buying and selling stocks, which is something else I learned this week, which I'll talk about in a minute too. And it's just not worth it. Maybe maybe if I was getting paid $25, $30 an hour, like a union wage, maybe that'd be different. But it's landscaping, and landscaping's not worth anything less than $12, $13 an hour, in my opinion. Because I used to do it for myself, and I used to do it for used to do it with another guy, and I took this job thinking that I was wanting consistent work rather than trying to hunt for the next side job. That I would have a consistent Monday through Friday schedule because when I worked at Ace, it was all over the place and it drove me nuts. I lost all context of time when you work. I was working. I would have like a Monday off and a Thursday off, and then I'd work all day on the weekends. And it's like a 7 to 9 shift, and then I come back the next day and work a 9 to 6 shift on weekends, and I would just get completely thrown off. And I remember just how crazy that was. And I had band going on too. I was drum major in high school, and so I was in the marching band and everything. And it was summer's just a really crazy time for me. But anyway, the stock trading. Something I learned this week is something called pattern day trading and round trip trading. So I feel fortunate enough that I was able to learn about stocks early enough that one of my first goals when I was young was to raise enough money to buy a decent amount of stock. I had $1,000 and I was able to put that in the bank, and then I raised another $1,000 to put in a stock trading account. I did that several years ago. So I've been actually been in the stocks for a long time because I know that with inflation and everything, especially with bank accounts and interest rates after the market crash in 2008, stocks are a really great way to make a lot of money, especially when you're not doing anything, especially if you put money in the bank, which I don't like spending money. I like making money. So that's kind of what I do with my money. I make money with the money that I make, if that makes sense. But anyway, pattern day trading, I learned about this week because I would buy and sell stocks on the same day. I would look at 9:30, at 10 o'clock in the morning when the market opened, and I'd look for stocks that would jump immediately, like 50, 60 cents, or in a price range where I could buy like 500, 600 shares. And so they would spike, and then I wait for them to go back down, and then I buy them, 500, 600 shares, and then I wait for it to go back up the 40 or 50 cents, and I'd sell it same day. And I learned that is what's called a pattern day trader. And that is frowned upon, which I've learned about. You're limited to doing 4 of those kind of transactions in a 5 business day period. And I was really curious as to why, because, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie like Catch Me If You Can or The Wolf of Wall Street or Aviator, any of those Leonardo DiCaprio movies, like even The Departed, all about those financial scheming operations, money laundering, crap like that. And I read about it, and actually pattern day trading is a significant sign of money laundering. It's a very quick way to launder your money, which that's exactly what money laundering is. It's basically you make bad money, you clean it and make it good money, in the sense that, say, you take money you stole from a bank, but you buy a bunch of art with it, and so now you have valuable assets that are not it's not stolen money anymore, supposedly. So then instead of giving that large sum of robbed money to someone else, you could sell this art to somebody and make the money back. And it's all financial stuff, which I'm learning slowly over time. And then round trip trading is where you say you're a company and you want to sell something. You sell assets to another company. Like say you sell, I don't know, say you're a grocery store and you sell all of your shopping carts to another grocery store, but you buy back all the grocery carts that are exactly the same. That is round trip trading, and that's also another sign of money laundering, to make bad money look good. So I was actually kind of pissed about that, because that is a really great way to make stocks, because stocks typically will perform once they go up in a day. They typically stay up. So if it goes up 50 cents, it's going to stay above what it opened at the rest of the day. But over time, stocks kind of go all over the place. So I was actually kind of upset about that. But I'm learning this stuff over time. I'm going to be an economics major at Purdue, so I'm quickly learning all this stuff. I'm actually in the honors college, political science and economics, honors degree. I don't know if I've ever mentioned in the podcast how much I hate school. So it's incredibly ironic that I do all this honors college double degree crap, but I was actually with my mom. We had met with the counselor at Purdue the other day, and I was trying to think of a name, like a nickname you could call me, because I'm just full of irony just because of all this school stuff. So I was thinking like Iron E, like because I'm Lee, but my name is spelled Lee, and so you do like Iron E, it would just be Iron dash EE. I couldn't think of any other names, or Iron Lee. That sounds kind of dumb. I know it's late in the episode, and I haven't mentioned at all why this episode is called what it's called. Few of you out there will know what this word that I'm about to say is. Many of you don't. I had no idea. I've been told it's an 80s word. And so I'm surprised. This is kind of something I would expect woodworkers and makers of all kinds to know. But the word is Skosh. It's what I decided to call this episode, because we were out on a job this week, and we were mulching. We had to plant a bunch of plants and whatnot. And then we finished the job, and then we come back the next morning. I'm on a crew, and our project manager says that the customer doesn't like where the plants are placed. And so we take the landscape plan and design, we go back, we talk with the landscape architect, and we go back out there and everything. And it was one of those situations where, it made a difference, but, in my opinion, it wasn't worth it. I mean, we literally moved plants a skosh. Skosh, look it up right now before I say anything. Look up what skosh means. I'm not going to tell you, because we would dig up these plants and we'd hardly move them at all. At the end of the day, we moved these plants a skosh. A skosh is a non-multipliable quantity. That is a extremely small amount. So, like, if you were to tap your pencil with your finger, like on the desk, just to move it over slightly, that's a skosh. You need to move your hammer over, your nail over where you're putting it just a little bit. That's a skosh. It's a small amount. That's exactly what it is. And because I had never heard of that word before, and I thought it was just so cool, that's what I wanted to call this episode. So as usual, I like to keep episodes of this podcast short just because I try to add some variety. Also, I don't like editing for forever. But if you would like actually for longer episodes, please leave us a comment, send us a message, tell us what you think, feedback, whatever you got. BreeceCreatorPodcast@gmail.com. Send us a DM, or you can comment directly on the podcast. In the outro of this podcast, I want to feature an artist who has released their music into the public domain. Artists who release their music into the public domain, I feel like understand what art is and how it contributes to the world around it. So I'm going to end episode number 9 of the Breece Creator Podcast with Together by Steam Funk. Check the show notes on the website to learn more about this song and the content in this episode at breecewoodworking.wixsite.com/creatorpodcast. You can tweet at us on Twitter or follow us on Instagram. I'm Lee Breece. I'll see you next time on the Breece Creator Podcast.